Welcome everyone, Dylan Gemelli here today with a brand new video for you. And this one I've always had an issue with. It's always bothered me, so I really want to do this one for everybody. We're going to continue Steroids the series, but the topic today is oral steroids hurt more than the liver. You can already see I'm animated about it, but I'm going to keep it cool. But before we get into that, huge thank you to everybody out there supporting and subscribing to the channel. I cannot thank you enough. It is just overwhelming and it means the world to me. Please, if you haven't yet, subscribe. Click that bell icon after you subscribe, otherwise YouTube won't notify you of all the new updates every time I post videos and you'll miss out. And also click that like button if you're enjoying the videos, because it just helps the channel to grow so much faster and it helps me to do more content. Also, when you see the video start, you'll see at the bottom some podcast links. Follow on those. We got Spotify, Apple, all of them are down there, but then you get these videos in podcast form. So let's get into it. Oral steroids hurt more than the liver. Now, this topic is extremely important to me. I've been on forums. A lot of you know that. A lot of you probably don't, but almost a decade now, pretty much a decade. Yeah, it has been. Sorry, the years, they all fly, especially with pandemic this and bullshit that. Anyway, where was I? We have got to address this issue where everybody thinks oral steroids only affect the liver, or they at least only address that. I see so many guys that make posts on the forums. Well, here's my cycle layout and I've got my liver care and there's nothing else listed. And that's great that you are at least understanding and acknowledging that you need to protect your liver, which can get hammered by a lot of toxic steroids, even Anavar, and I'll get into that here in a minute. But there's so much more that's going on here that is being affected. The one that first comes to mind, and for me, I would think it would be more important than the liver even, is blood pressure. I don't see so many people not comment on blood pressure. I look around and I realize, wow, I think they either are missing out or not realizing the importance here. So we've got to address that. You don't want blood pressure issues when you're running. Well, you don't want it ever, but especially when you're running steroids. And oral steroids, especially something like Anadrol, for example, they can nail your blood pressure. Superdrol, I cringe at the thought of not protecting yourself from that. You should, I don't care if you're taking protection or not, you should be monitoring your blood pressure even without oral steroids throughout an entire steroid cycle. That's the first thing. You have got to stay on top of that, because steroids themselves, especially if you get elevated estrogen, you're going to get a blood pressure increase. There's a multitude of things. Tren definitely hammers blood pressure. Just because it's not an oral doesn't mean that it still can't cause you an increase in blood pressure, even if it's not direct as an indirect, it still can cause it. So you've got to be aware of that. You've got to stay on top of that. Well, then what about your kidneys? What about your cholesterol? I mean, there's so many aspects of this that you've got to protect yourself with. You can't just address one. Cholesterol is another one that can just get nailed, especially like Winstrol. One of the main areas that Winstrol seems to be more toxic in is cholesterol. Tren, once again, cholesterol. And then we're talking about an injectable with Tren, but all the oral steroids can definitely hit you there. And, one of the things that I've always said is about when you have a higher body fat, I have a concern. And look, I've seen people with higher body fats, and if you look at their blood work, it's to the T, better than a lot of the people that are in great condition. But there's a lot of people with a higher body fat that are going to have more cholesterol problems, more blood pressure problems, etc. And then I see them running oral steroids and they've already got these problems, and I'm like, oh no, don't do this to yourself. But you got to be careful how you come across to people too, because they think you're lecturing or being rude about it. I am just looking out here. And I brought up Anavar, and I brought up Anavar because I see a lot of people go, well, Anavar's light, Anavar's mild. Look, Anavar is mild in comparison to an Anadrol or a D-ball. Yeah, absolutely. I would never argue that with you. But it's still a toxic oral steroid. Literally, I'm not just saying this just to say it. I just read a post about 2 days ago about somebody that said, well, predictably, I ran an oral steroid and this, and this happened. And I said, well, what was it? And he said, Anavar. And I said, please don't tell me you fell into that trap. Yes. it's still toxic. It's still going to hurt all of the areas that I just described to you. You have just got to stay on top of this. I hate to see people put themselves through this because it's so unnecessary, and it wrecks my brain to see people that suffer for no reason, just either out of, I don't want to use the word ignorance, but I'd say ignorance to not actually reading about what they're doing or just taking somebody else's word for it, or just saying, oh, it's not going to affect me, or whatever the case may be. You can't completely eradicate these side effects, but you can stay on top of them and mitigate them, and you can do that with your supports that you need to run. I'm going to show you one that I recommend. You can do that by dosing it at a reasonable dose and not going overboard. There's ways to keep the side effects lower, but you've got to be willing to, look it over, understand it all, and address it. Now, I use a product called N2Guard. N2Guard has 45 ingredients that are going to protect you. Do you need that many? Well, maybe not, but it covers every single area that you need to cover, and it takes some of the best ingredients possible. Tudka for your liver, for example, is in here. There's so many things in there, so that's what I would recommend. There's other all-in-ones out there that are probably less money with a lot less ingredients in it, but will still be beneficial to you. I just prefer this because I know the product so well, but that's N2Guard. But regardless, look, you've got to protect yourself in all of these areas. Please, please, please make sure that you're doing your blood work, you're keeping an eye on everything, you're not getting out of line with your dosing, you're not running orals too long, things of that nature. They're going to cause you nothing but problems, and this is all things that are easily avoidable if you just do things in the right way. So, you know what to do from there. That being said, stay tuned for plenty more to come. Dylan Gemelli, signing off.